A little bit more reaction here. Matlala, did you get a sense that this did enough for you? Did that offer sufficient change that we can push forward from here?
Afternoon, Arabile. To be quite honest, there's nothing substantially new in what the president has tabled. I mean, the president has focused on the availability of energy. Look, firstly, there has been a slow pace in terms of facilitating own use generation in terms of energy. If you look in the past 5 years, there's only been 5 licenses issued by the Department of Energy in terms of own use generation. 5 licenses in the past 5 years in terms of own use generation that exceeds 1 megawatt. Already, there's a challenge there. Now we get to the reindustrialization program. When we get to the reindustrialization program that supports localization and exports of South African goods. Firstly, in 2011, there was the the local procurement accord. This was in 2011 where stakeholders actually committed to procuring 75% of their products from local manufacturers. What happened to that? This is nothing necessarily new. And in terms of exports, this will actually take for South African companies to be competitive on a global scale. We look at our SMMEs in the South African context, they're not really the most competitive SMMEs globally. One of the things he speaks about broadband availability, as part of the infrastructure rollout. The president here misses the point that, the broadband strategy has been around since 2012. What has happened to that? The digital migration as well, in terms of broadcasting digital migration, has actually hampered the broadband availability, because once there's this digital migration, in terms of it happens, it will open up avenues for low-cost broadband. But one thing that people have brought up, several of your speakers they have brought up, is implementation. But no one actually touches on the underlying causes of this lack of implementation. The underlying causes of this lack of implementation is quite simple. It's a lack of state capacity. The president actually sidestepped this elephant in the room. He did not make mention of how to improve state capacity in terms of the competencies, bureaucratic competencies within the state. Unless we address this, we're going to have many, many plans that are not implemented. Another aspect is monitoring and evaluation. I had, since Thandeka there, mentioned that, we keep in the same microeconomic framework that has not worked. How sure are we that it has not worked if we have not done any substantive monitoring and evaluation of our policies? This is one of the things that government lacks on. So it's state capacity, and that capacity actually hinders the ability of government to monitor and evaluate the policies that they have put in place. But generally, I feel that this economic recovery plan offers nothing new, and it fails to address the elephant in the room, which is the decline and lack of state capacity.
Matlala, you make really such valid points. But I suppose then one could say, though, that we can say that it hasn't worked, because if we haven't been monitoring and evaluating it, we've already failed in that aspect. So that's already a failure in many instances. Do you see a little more political will? I asked Thandeka the same question as well, and I'll pose it to you. The president put out a sense of urgency towards the end there, that it's up to us now. We need to do this. Does that galvanize you at this point? Does that make you feel like the rest of cabinet and government as a whole is actually going to, action all of these?
Look, I'm not as enthusiastic about the implementation. One, as I've indicated, state capacity, right? And you mentioned political will. One of the issues that hampers state capacity is that blurry interface between state and party. Something that the president, has tried to sidestep as well. Yes, he did make mention earlier in the year that, cadre deployment has to be merited. But this interface needs to be managed well, because it encroaches on the capacity of the state. Secondly, we have a high vacancy rate within the public service, whether at municipal level or at provincial or national departments. And one of the issues is that a local government level is the hardest hit level of government in terms of incapacity. This is the interface between people or citizens on the ground and government, the provision of services by government. This is the most important layer of government. We need to fix the incapacities at the level of government if we are to get anything right. Because if you listen very well to the president, he did make mention of infrastructure in rural areas and small towns. In 2012, there was a small town regeneration program. What happened to that? In fact, this small town regeneration program now forms part of SALGA's strategy for 2017 to 2022. These plans have always been there. This small town regeneration program is all about rolling out infrastructure in rural and small towns and actually making them realize their economic potential. Unless the implementation and the capacity challenges are addressed, we will still sing the same song come 5 years from now.
Yep. It's going to get tough unless we actually do the hard graft. Matlala Setlhalogile, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it here on SABC News. A really in-depth and succinct look at exactly what the president had put forward there when it comes to that reconstructive and economic growth plan.